That was in Bombay. It was a recording of the Fourth Symphony by Bruno Walter, and the singer was Daisy Halbach. It was my first. Well, as a young person, maybe it was a good start, because the Fourth Symphony is looking at the world through the eyes of a child. I was not a child, I was a teenager, but the music was immediately accessible. I met Bruno Walter for the first time here in Vienna at the Mahler year, 1960. He came and Elisabeth Schwarzkopf sang the Mahler Lieder. And then after the intermission was the Fourth Symphony. And I was at the rehearsals, and I didn't dare to go and speak with him. So, in fact, I just met him a little bit backstage in the conductor's room. Told him I was a ambitious young person, and he wished me the best, that's all. But I went through the whole First Symphony with him. And he is the one who told me about Callot's lithograph that Mahler saw and was so effective that he composed this funeral march in the third movement, but the funeral march goes right into a very vulgar Jewish dance. And he says, don't be shy, you have to play that dance in its, don't try to make it sympathetic. Play it in the vulgar way. And that was Mahler's youth, hearing Jewish music also. But I don't do it in a vulgar way, in a sense, but it is very Jewish in its accent. Dee, da, 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 dee, dee, da, da. And that is the depiction in the lithograph of the animals who killed the hunter. And they are carrying the hunter in procession. So it starts with this Frère Jacques or Bruder Martin canon, but then it goes into this dance because the animals are rejoicing that they killed the hunter. So it all makes sense. All this he brought to life for me, which I didn't know before. And he went to the piano and he played the way you have to start the second movement, parampa, because Mahler has not written tarampa, Mahler has written tarampa, 2 eighth notes. And he says, no, that comes from the song, Rehingel, Rehingel, these sort of things that, I can't forget all my life. No, because since I didn't know the Mahler Ninth at all, I wouldn't know what to discuss with him. But I was at all the recording sessions. So I had no score even. So I just listened. But the tragedy was, he wanted so much to record this symphony that he accepted all the conditions of Columbia Records. I don't know about financial conditions. Maybe he did it for nothing. I don't know. But they had 12 first violins and 4 basses. This, in other words, Columbia Records told him, we will do it. Of course, it will never sell. So if you want to do it, we will do it for you, but we cannot afford more musicians. Now, not only that, but these musicians, they were all musicians of the Los Angeles Philharmonic. They also didn't know the Mahler Ninth. So they were sight reading, prima vista, and recording at the same time. They were good musicians, and he was very patient with them. But when you read the reviews of this recording later, this is the definitive, and nobody can play it like that. They were sight reading. Not too much. No, I went to him with a score. When we finished, I left. He spoke about the music more. But Alma Mahler used to live almost as his neighbor. But in those days, she had moved to New York. And I met Alma once, much later, a few years later. I visited her, and she told me a lot in this one visit, how she used to you know, sit in the hut and how he would compose, and she would advise him, and she would fill in the orchestrations like he would tell her. And then she showed me, of course, the fans of Kokoschka and the plans of Gropius. She lived with all her genius around her. It was like a Viennese apartment. That he was a difficult person to live with. That he would come from the opera for lunch and he wanted his soup on the table at a certain temperature, and if he didn't get it, he would be furious. It was not easy living with him. She didn't tell me, of course, many details. She didn't talk all about her other boyfriends, of course not. But Miss Schoenberg, with whom I was very friendly in Los Angeles, told me that, you know, people only talk about her with her lovers, and you don't know how she influenced all those men. She was the fountain that they borrowed from. Mahler, Gropius, Werfel, etc. And she suffered with all of them because they were all neurotic. This is what Mrs. Schoenberg said. And it was not easy to live with them. She did not say, therefore, it's understandable that she had lovers. This she didn't say, of course. I invited him twice to my performances so that I can talk to him. So he came to the Fifth Symphony. We didn't like it too much. So we sat and we talked. And he says, what you are doing is you are trying to make it more beautiful than it is. If Mahler gets ordinaire, vulgar, in other words, when he brings the street music in, don't be afraid, play it as a street music. Don't try to cover it and make it more beautiful. And then he came to the Third Symphony, and he liked that much more. He told me that the finale he would take much slower, much more. But the Fifth Symphony he criticized a lot, but constructively, because we were friends. And I learned a lot. And for me, being a conductor of the New York Philharmonic and the Israel Philharmonic, both Mahler specialists, to have Lenny each season as a guest conductor, because he would do one symphony there, one in New York. And so both my orchestras, with me and with Lenny, we did so much Mahler together. And that was a great boon. And when Lenny left us, I missed him, and my orchestras missed him immensely, immensely. I was there in the box, and Bruno Walter started the third movement, and the pizzicatos, which are like bell-like between cello and basses, and he says quite loudly in German, are the pizzicatos not together, or is it my hearing? You know, they were neighbors in Los Angeles also. I don't think they were very friendly. Oh, tremendously. Schoenberg and Webern were great Mahler lovers. Webern conducted Mahler's Sixth Symphony with the Arbeiter Orchestra, with the Workers' Symphony here, before the war even. And Mahler went to this famous concert, also held by Alma. You know, the Alma teacher was Zemlinsky, etc. The famous concert where Schoenberg's Chamber Symphony was performed, and there was a riot, and Mahler was there, and Mahler recognized the future. Well, as I said before, everything came from the innermost depths of his soul. Whether in the first movement, also in the finale with this storm breaking, and then he comes to this very lyrical part of the First Symphony, goes into D flat major. You just stand. Sometimes when the orchestra is playing so convincingly, I don't even know that I'm standing. I'm floating. It is Mahler who's doing that. And that continues until the end of the Ninth Symphony. You don't know where these last viola notes dissipate, where they end. At least when I'm rehearsing it, I talk as less as I can with the orchestra about it. Of course, I tell them, look, this is his farewell. You are playing the farewell. And I let them, phrase by phrase, dissipate, evaporate. And they do it by themselves. Amazingly, I've done it with few orchestras. It always, the music talks to them, in other words. So I used to hear sometimes anti-Mahler stories from my professors that they heard from their teachers, that Mahler didn't compose original music, he only copied from others. One story was that when the Mahler's secretary would go to the library and bring him scores of other composers, they would say, "Ah, Mahler is composing again." Those, these are musician stories. Those were one of the first things I heard. Mahler never composed an original note. He only borrowed from others. And when Swarovski used to hear that, he said, okay, maybe he borrowed a little theme or a motive, but what did he do with that motive? How did he develop it? This you have to recognize as Mahler's genius. Not only because he maybe took 3 notes from an opera. Oh, I would say a lot. I would say a lot. When you do the Ring, after you have done Mahler, like in my case, you sometimes hear things in the Ring. I said, I've heard this before. Just little harmonic progressions. It's not copying or anything. Or tonalities, insertions, very important. The Mahler uses sometimes D flat major and G flat major. This Wagner also uses in certain, to portray certain emotions. This is important. But sometimes in the third movement of the Sixth Symphony, I hear a little harmonic progression which is pure Rachmaninoff. And we know that Rachmaninoff played with Mahler in New York. It's just not copying. It's just a little progression comes into it. Now, I don't know if Rachmaninoff heard him conduct the Sixth Symphony and put it in his concerto. This I don't know. But there is a similarity. Some little Carmen motifs. In the third act, Carmen, the smugglers. The comes into the Third Symphony all the time. Now, maybe he was conducting Carmen in those days in Hamburg. I don't know. It's worth checking. Things like that. Inner peace, which he never had. He didn't have peace inside as a child. From his first conducting appearances, he was always fighting with everybody. Not because he was a fighter, he had to put himself through as a conductor, as an interpreter, as a composer. And the end of his marriage was very painful to him. For his wife to tell him half an hour before he went on stage in Munich to conduct the Mahler 8th world premiere that she loved another man. You can imagine with what an anxiety he went on this stage.